They're already cheating on the election with this, and you don't know what's happening because the judge is so biased, so corrupt. He's so corrupt.
Closing arguments start Tuesday in former President Donald Trump's hush money trial in New York. This as we are now just less than 2 months from the Republican National Convention in Milwaukee and less than 6 months from Election Day.
The latest average of all the polls right now show Trump with a 0.1% lead over Biden in Wisconsin. A lot to get to with ABC News political director Rick Klein. Rick, it's good to see you.
Thanks for having me. Always great to be here.
I want to start with the trial. We could have a verdict as soon as this week. Regardless what happens inside the courtroom with whatever verdict comes out this week, is there really going to be an impact? Is this going to really move the needle here politically in a place like Battleground, Wisconsin?
Well, there's a couple of different scenarios that I think play differently. A conviction, first of all, we've seen it consistently in our polls. There's a good chunk of Trump supporters that say they'd reconsider their support or maybe even not vote for him if he's convicted of a crime. Whether that's true or not is something else. But an acquittal or a hung jury, which I think Trump would spin in the same way as an exoneration, I think would play a lot differently because it plays very perfectly into the storyline he's tried to make of these being politically motivated prosecutions. And if the prosecutors cannot prove beyond a reasonable doubt that he's guilty of a crime, that I think is potentially rocket fuel for his campaign. And I think it's increasingly likely that there won't be any other trials before the election. So for all the talk there's been over this unprecedented moment where you could have a convicted criminal running for office, if in fact that is lifted from over his head, in some ways it raises the stakes of the election, but in other ways it gives Trump a very powerful argument.
With that, Rick, let's look ahead to November. Trump has indicated in interviews here in Wisconsin he may not accept the results of the election in November. It's prompting mixed reactions from Republicans across the country. I want to play what the state chairman of the Wisconsin Republican Party said last week at their state convention. Take a listen.
Yeah, we fully, especially with our election integrity operation, we fully expect to be in a situation where we're going to accept the election results. I expect and want to accept the results because that's the best for everyone. But, you know, if it's an 800 vote race or something, we'll have another discussion.
All right. U.S. Senate candidate Eric Hovde, the Republican, told me here exclusively last week he will accept the results. Senator Ron Johnson saying we have to see what happens. Everyone's all over the board on this. What kind of impact is this going to have?
Well, I think you heard from the state party chair about as good an answer or as solid an answer as you're likely to get from any major Republican who wants to keep his or her job in the age of Trump, leaving open the window, which I think exists for everyone. If there's real contests around an election, that's different. But to be clear, that's not what happened in 2020. That is not what Donald Trump was saying or doing in Wisconsin or elsewhere in trying to contest the elections. That was not a legitimate question about the integrity of the election. And I think most people, including those running for office like Hovde, recognize that that's not the kind of scenario you want. There's always that possibility. You have the courts, and Donald Trump made liberal use of the courts in the post-election period. He lost all of those major cases, and he lost the election. That I think is demonstrably and importantly different than the kind of rhetoric you still see from Trump himself and some of his supporters, sowing doubt as to whether they would actually accept the results.
Less than 2 months until the Republican convention here in Milwaukee. Let's look ahead to that. Well, we've seen some news in recent days, including personnel, certain staffing hires, then potentially not hires and fires. What's going to happen at the convention? What are you going to be watching most closely?
Yeah, look, I can't wait to get to Milwaukee. I think it's going to be a fantastic convention city. It's also going to be potentially a very chaotic convention. We've seen protests around the country, around college campuses that have been very significant and potentially disruptive. And I think there's going to be a lot of people who are looking to disrupt the proceedings. And you've got the Trump campaign running the show. And in the past, they have had some very unpredictable actions. So I think it's going to be a great showcase for Milwaukee, but it's also going to be kind of a tense time for the nation.
Rick, really quickly, what do you make of Nikki Haley saying this past week that she's going to be voting for Donald Trump just months after calling him unhinged and not qualified to lead the nation?
Yeah, I think it was striking. It didn't seem like a wholehearted, full-throated endorsement, but still it's significant for her to say that she's going to vote for him. It's been an embarrassment for Trump, not just that he had to contend with her in the primaries while she was still running, but after she dropped out, you saw Nikki Haley continuing to get 18, 19, 20, 21% of the vote, even though she was long since not a candidate. And so I think, look, not every Haley voter is just going to take her word for it or follow her lead, but it takes away a storyline that might have haunted the Trump campaign in Milwaukee and elsewhere to know that that Haley was out there as potentially not voting for him.
Another busy week ahead. ABC News political director Rick Klein. Rick, like always, thank you.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
Up next, patrolling the water.